Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is Friday night, 10 o'clock p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, February 25th. I'm glad to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room's open. I did pop the link into the article that we were talking about all week, Monday, on dysfunctional families. And the reason I want to bring this up is because there's not always abuse in dysfunctional families, but it can kind of lead to, and it's sort of a breeding grounds for abusive behaviors. It's not always abusive, dysfunctional families, but it's very hard for the children who grow up in these dysfunctional families. And I grew up in a dysfunctional family, and I just think this article is really good. I stumbled across it, actually. It was posted on Facebook and around in a couple different places, and I saw it on Dreamcatchers for Abused Children website, and so I just took a look at it because obviously I'm interested, because I'm always looking for more information regarding my own situation and what I went through, right? So that's what we're still talking about. So everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. For all the people that are listening live, for all the people that are listening to the archives, thank you so much. It's a lot of work listening to my shows, and I know it's hard to keep up with them all. I do so many, and so thank you for the support. And I'm not a counselor or therapist. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own shows, and I just, you have to listen at your own discretion, because I'm talking about abuse, and I don't sugarcoat it, I don't minimize it, I just tell it like it is, and so it can be disturbing, and so you have to know if you're safe enough to listen to it, if you're okay with it. It's ultimately your discretion, because it's your ears, and you are responsible for what you listen to. So if the topics of abuse bother you, then you must turn it off. It's your discretion, right? Young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows from an adult, caregiver, parent, somebody who can help you make a decision whether you should be listening or not, because there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and I really believe that children should be protected at all times. That's what I'm standing up and fighting for, our child rights, and to protect children, to save children's lives. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. Glad to be a part of that organization, and I'm glad to be a voice for the kids out here. And you need to learn how to protect yourself. So if you're a young person under the age of 18, learn how to protect yourself when you're online if you don't already know how to do that. Be very, very careful. Into your browser, Internet Safety for Children, Online Safety for Children, and that'll bring up websites that have really good information on there about how to keep yourself safe, what to do, what not to do in a chat room situation, what information not to give away, how to go about doing this so you can keep yourself safe, right? It's very important. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Dysfunctional families. This is a really good article, and I'm going to give you the actual full title and who wrote it. This is from the Mudrashram Institute of Spiritual Studies, Mudrashram Institute of Spiritual Studies. Mudrashram. It says, when you grow up in a dysfunctional family. It's written by George A. Boyd from 1992. It's a really good article. It's quite lengthy. It's from www.mudrashram.com /dysfunctional number 2.html. There's all kinds of stuff on here. There's types of dysfunctional families, roles within dysfunctional families, healthy families. Codependent. Talks a lot about codependency, and a lot of the question of boundaries, unhealthy families, setting your personal boundaries, and things like this. Really good information for survivors, especially, and for people who may have grown up in a dysfunctional home. It's good information for me, and I'm always learning and trying to learn more and more about how to correct some of these behaviors that I picked up from living in an abusive, dysfunctional home. So good info for many people, and I hope you will go check this particular website out. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate it. We'll get right into this. We left off sort of talking about healthy and unhealthy families, and they go on to, George A. Boyd goes on to sort of describe the whole issues of codependency within healthy families and unhealthy families. And he says, codependency is transmitted through family learning, and family members come to believe that these distorted patterns of relating are normal. As the family is the primary arena of socialization, children growing up in these families are ill-equipped to deal with the demands of the larger world outside the family home. They're often saddled with inadequate coping skills, distorted perceptions of what is appropriate behavior, and unrealistic expectations of the behavior of other people. To heal these dysfunctional patterns of relating, the codependent adult must get into touch with the inner child, the real self within. This part of us is alive, energetic, creative, and capable of seeing things as they really are. It says the inner child can love others unconditionally and can tell the truth. In contrast, they say the codependent false self feels uncomfortable, strained, inauthentic in relating to other people. It acts to cover up, deny, withhold genuine feelings, and inhibits spontaneous, natural, or playful behavior. It may develop a negative attitude towards self or others that is envious, critical, blaming, shaming, perfectionistic. It tends to be other-oriented, focused on what it believes others think it should be or others want it to be. And it is capable of only conditional love, rewarding others only if they conform to its inner values of what is right and wrong. And codependency is generated in emotionally disturbed family systems by inconsistent, unpredictable, and crazy parenting styles. In physically and sexually abusive family systems, codependency is related to the violation of personal boundaries. So this is kind of where we left off talking on Wednesday night. Victims of abuse fear that the violation may reoccur at any time and also experience an invasion of their self-respect. They cannot control their own bodies, and their choices and desires are not respected. In alcoholic and drug-using family systems, codependency arises as a result of the unpredictable behavior of the substance abuser and the stresses it places on the other members of the family. In fundamentalist dogmatic families, codependency is created by over-control and excessive regimentation. In healthy family system, family members openly acknowledge their problems, discuss them openly, and work toward change. They believe change is acceptable and actively solicit workable solutions from other family members. Children in these families are free to express their needs and wants. Family members can talk about feelings and traits in themselves that they feel should be changed. Shame and embarrassment do not immobilize them. There is permission to express appropriate anger. The adults of the family model healthy, congruent behavior for their children. What they tell their children to do and what they themselves do match. And so there's a real difference between an unhealthy and a healthy family. Families function to provide the following needs for their members. Number one, maintenance, the provision of food, clothes, shelter, health care. Number two, nurturance, the granting of safety, security, warmth, and a sense of home. Number three, inclusion, the fulfilling of love and belongingness needs. Number four, privacy, respect for each other's members, for each member's autonomy and separateness. Number five, esteem, the bestowing of a sense of worth and personal value on its members. Number six, understanding the agreed upon right of members to make mistakes and learn from them. And number seven, recreation, the opportunity to have fun together. Number eight, spirituality, the permission to develop a relationship with a higher power, to have meaning and purpose in life. It says to the degree that these functions of the family are eclipsed by dysfunction of one or more of its members and by the codependency that derives from this, to that degree will the ability of its members to successfully cope with life in the world outside the family be diminished. Yeah, I mean, I know because I grew up in this stuff, you know what I mean? And like in our home there was no, but we had food and we had clothing. We didn't have the best of everything because my parents, were doing the best they could with what they had, and they had 7 children. And my mom was very sick, and she didn't start working until I was at least until I was around 10 years old, and she was working just really part-time, micro part-time. So she was in the home most of the time. Then she started working quite a few hours when I hit about 12, 13 years old. Not a full day, not a full-time position, but she was still part-time, but she was putting in a few more hours. My dad was working as hard as he could, even though they were abusive and whatnot. They did work, and they did try to, put food on the table. They did provide a place for us to live. There was not a lot of fancy stuff, and the clothes were quite often just hand-me-downs because I was the last born. We didn't have a whole lot of new stuff. But, we didn't care about that stuff. We were just concerned because our parents were always fighting and very abusive towards each other and abusive towards the children. So it wasn't the stuff in the house that was bothering us, it was the destruction that was going on within the home that was bothering us. Nurturance, the granting of safety, security, warmth, and a sense of home, that we never had. There was no nurturance, there was no safety, no security, there was no warmth, no loving, care. There was no sense of home, right? Inclusion, the fulfilling of love and belongingness needs. There was none of that in our home when we were growing up. I don't think there ever was for any of my siblings. They were all older than myself. I'm the youngest. And my oldest sister was 18 years older than me, so there's an 18-year spread between me and my 7 siblings, or 6 siblings. I'm the 7th, right? Esteem, the bestowing of a sense of worth and personal value on its members. There was none of that. We didn't grow up with any sense of worth or personal value, and that's because we were told we were worthless, and we were beaten and kicked around and told we were just worthless pieces of you-know-what, and called names and made to feel extremely bad about ourselves. Understanding the agreed upon right of members to make mistakes and learn from them. Our parents used any excuse to fight, so anytime there was any kind of mistake made, it was a chance for everybody to duke it out and or beat on the kids. So mistakes were not welcomed, and we didn't necessarily learn from them. We just were beaten and treated extremely badly. And so my mom would do stuff like, she would say, well, as long as you don't get caught, I don't care what you're doing. She told my brothers that, because my brothers were drug users and they were quite often involved with petty crime and whatnot. And she'd be like, I don't care what you're doing, just don't get yourself caught, because she was so unable and unwilling to care for her children. That she knew my brothers were doing drugs and did nothing to try to help them by, taking them in to see counselors or getting them into drug rehabs or anything like that. Both my parents did not care about their children as far as that went, right? And it's because they didn't care about themselves. They didn't care about the family. They didn't care about each other. They were, by the time I was born and was cognitive, my parents were suicidal. So it had gotten that bad. You know what I mean? That both my parents were always talking about suicide, and my dad was always attempting suicide. My mom, I don't know if she ever attempted suicide, but I don't think she did, but she may have. But she was always talking about it. And my dad was quite often talking about it, but he was also attempting it. So, they had given up by the time I came along and didn't care whether the kids lived or died, and that's why, I kind of like to bring to light things that would happen in the home, like, I got really sick one night and threw up in my bed and I was choking and really was very, very sick. And my mom made me sleep in my own throw up and things like this. Like she did not care. Right? She could. I was also in a car accident when I had my car, my first car. I was pretty young. I just turned 16, and I bought my car. I worked for it, and I had a little car wreck, and it didn't hurt anybody or anything like that, but it did wreck the car up a little bit. But it was just with a tree, so it wasn't like anybody else was involved. But I told her about this, and she was like, "Oh well." She didn't care. She didn't say, "Oh, you better go to the hospital and get yourself checked out," or "Are you okay?" or anything like that. She was just like, "Whatever," because my parents didn't care if we lived or died. Like they really didn't. And then when my brother committed suicide, when I was 20, he was 33. This is so many years later. My parents were sitting around crying the blues, and I was so angry. I'm like, "Why are you crying now? You never cared for us the whole time we were growing up, the whole time we were children. You never did anything to be good to us, to treat us properly, to not abuse us, to not hurt us. And now you're going to sit and cry?" I was just like, no, that just doesn't fly with me. So, yeah, there was a whole lot of problems and a whole lot of mental illness. So we were not worth anything to them, and we did not feel worthy. So we had a lot of problems with that. Understanding the agreed upon right to make mistakes. Recreation, the opportunity to have fun together. We didn't have any fun together. The only time we had fun, any kind of fun, was if we got invited to somebody's house for dinner. And quite often, my oldest sister, who was 18 years old, who was moved out of the home before I was born because she was escaping the abuse, got married, had 2 kids, didn't want these 2 kids, almost killed them. My mom had to actually step in and intervene, even though my mom was almost killing me. This is how sick and twisted this kind of stuff gets. So she didn't want these 2 kids. She had these 2 boys, but she eventually grew to love them, I guess. But she was my sister grew up in the same home I did. She became an abuser. She was a horrible, horrible woman. She treated her husband horrifically, abused him physically and in every other way, manipulated his life. My oldest sister was the abuser in her home. She controlled every aspect of her husband's life until she died. She died of cancer not too long ago, a few years back. And her sons, she treated them pretty bad. And we knew this, but see, I was being mistreated too. And so, what are you going to do when everybody's mistreating everybody? And the whole thing is we just grew up like this. This was just the way we grew up. So we didn't have much fun together, but once in a while, if my sister invited us to dinner, it gave us all an opportunity to come together over a meal. And my sister, if we went to her house, because she was married and had these kids and had her own place, and they had a nice house and everything, and she would demand that my parents would not fight while they were over there. So she would be like, if you guys start an argument, you will leave, So my parents had to behave themselves at her place. Like, she wouldn't allow them to get into any kind of arguments or fights there at her place. She was like, this is my home, and you will not do that. You know what I mean? Because my parents used to fight everywhere. They fought out in public. They fought at They used to argue at other people's homes. They didn't so much batter each other physically at other people's homes, only within our home. But in stores, I watched them physically batter each other in stores and in restaurants, throwing food at each other in restaurants and cursing at each other, slapping each other around. My dad slapping my mom throwing something at my dad. They were very physically abusive and towards each other and the children. And so it was quite embarrassing to be out in public with them. And my sister, she had her house, and she was like, "No way are you doing this stuff over here." So when we went to their house, we actually did have a good time, because my parents had to behave themselves, and I got to play with my nephews who were my age, and really more like cousins, but because of they were my sister's children, they were my nephews, but really we were so close in age by like a year and 3 months, But when we were there, we were having a good time, but we didn't do anything as a family. We went on a couple of barbecues, and we went into the mountains a couple of times. That was about it. We didn't do any normal stuff, Spirituality, the permission to develop a relationship with a higher power to have meaning and purpose in life. Like our parents were fighting over spirituality all the time because my dad was Christian, and he would come home and beat on his wife, beat on his children, on Sundays especially, and then try to kill himself on Sunday night running down the freeway and things like this. He was schizophrenic, and so he had a lot of problems. But the thing is my mom he would be like, "You're all sinners, you're going to hell," on a Sunday. He'd come home from church and start yelling at the family and gather us all in the living room and punch my brother out and slap my mom around, and everybody else would be getting in the middle of it, and me too included. And it was kind of ridiculous. Then my mom would say, "Well, if you're going to heaven, then I'd rather go to hell because I don't want to spend the rest of my life in eternity with you." And so the kids, that sort of turned us off from spirituality. We didn't really have any spirituality. We were just kind of like, we thought we were in hell, and we were kind of wondering why God would let this happen. We had a whole lot of problems with our own spirituality. I found my peace, thank God. And but I know that some of my brothers never did, and I know one of my brothers who's living today. I don't know what's the matter with him, but he's rather screwed up. It's sad what this stuff does to people, and I watched this sort of thing destroy my family. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, speaking out about this publicly, because to me, silence is the issue. Because it's all hidden away. Nobody wants to talk about it. Well, it is painful, and you have to be aware, as a survivor. Not many survivors, there's some, but not many would tell their story because it's very painful to have to go through and talk about this stuff. But see, I lived with this my whole entire life from the day I was 0, firstborn, 1 day old, my whole life, right? So I've lived with this my whole life. I also had a lot of friends who were abused. Abuse has just been part of my life forever, and the aftermath, right? So I don't mind talking about this stuff, and especially if I feel that it can help shed some light on the issues, and also for other survivors to know that they're not alone, and that they certainly did not deserve what they were put through. It's just unfortunate, you know what I mean? But I don't mind talking about this stuff. But this is why I'm doing this, because this dysfunction and abuse, it really killed my family, destroyed my family, and there's really nothing left. There was nothing when I came into the world, and there's nothing now. It was completely destroyed before I was born, right? And so that's really sad. It's unfortunate this stuff happens. So if you're somebody who's lived with this, and you're having a hard time, make sure you do reach out and get some help, whether it's a counselor, therapist, a crisis line, group support, whatever works for you. We're all different. We all need different things, and whatever works for you, and get some help, right? It's so sad that people don't get help with these issues. My parents had the opportunity to get help. They were court ordered to get help, and did they get help? No. It's just pretty sad that people would not want to help their family, would not, even if they didn't care about themselves so much or each other. They should have done it for the kids. We should have mattered enough to them that they would have done it for us, but we just didn't matter to them, so they didn't care, right? It was pretty obvious that we were pretty low down on the totem pole, they didn't care that they were hurting us. They did not care that they were brought up on abuse charges. They didn't care, period. So that's pretty sad to grow up with two adults who are supposed to be your parents and supposed to be caring for you, caring about you, loving you, teaching you things, nurturing you, providing a good home, a stable environment, and when they don't, and they just leave you there to your own demise and then hurt you and abuse you, it's hard to come back. It's hard to grow. It's hard to have a good life. It's hard to have a decent life, And it's taken all my life to get, to make any kind of sense of this. And and I only started my healing journey like 4 years ago. So I have come a long way in 4 years, let me tell you that. But it's been a long 4 years. And I'm so glad it happened, because now I feel so much better today than I ever did. And so that's why I encourage people, and that's why I'm doing these shows. I've been doing these for about a year, a little over a year now, a year and 4 months, and I just wanted to be another voice for people to say, especially for survivors, to say, keep going, do whatever you can to have a good life. You certainly deserve it, but it really is ultimately up to us. We have to do it for ourselves. We can't just hope and pray that somebody will come along and do it for us. That's what I was doing, and then I realized it's never going to happen. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to learn how to take care of myself, how to love myself, how to get rid of some of these behaviors that were really holding me down, holding me back, that were just learned behaviors, that wasn't my fault. Even though I have to pay the price for it, it certainly wasn't my fault. And just to learn how to find joy in this life and peace, and that there is good stuff and there's good people, and that it's not all bad, right? And my two brothers couldn't see that. They're dead. One killed himself, and the other one died of a drug overdose in a shelter here in Calgary, all by himself, alone, at 37. And they couldn't see anything good in this world, right? Nothing. And that's really sad. That's very, very sad. So that's why I keep encouraging people to get some help, right? Dr. Janet Kizier sees that the family roles embody these functions of family, albeit in a distorted way. The enabler provides for nurturance needs and may ensure maintenance needs as well. If the dependent is incapacitated, the hero brings esteem to the family, the scapegoat mistakes, so that the individual and family derive understanding and learn from them, the lost child, privacy, and the mascot, recreation. So earlier in this article, like Monday, we were talking about what these different roles were. The hero role, the scapegoat, the one everybody blames in the family. It's all your fault, There's the lost child, and there's the mascot, and things like that. She also points out 3 other roles that appear in some dysfunctional families, and that of the princess or little man, the doer, and that of the family priest. So the princess or little man, she says, is the child that is cast in the role of the family favorite. And this family member is often subject to emotional or covert incest, becoming a substitute spouse for the opposite sex partner or parent. As a result, this family member never gets his or her needs met, and the princess or little man is not allowed to be a child, as he or she must always be available to service the needs of mother and father. Children who are pressed into this role often attract sexually and physically abusive partners in their adult relationship, as they never form proper boundaries. And this child often embodies the inclusion or love and belongingness needs of the family. The doer is often cast as the breadwinner, the caretaker for the family, furnishing its maintenance needs. He or she tends to be over-responsible and yet is saddled with guilt, feeling that he or she has never does enough. The result of this labor of love on behalf of the family that takes up all the doer's time and strength is that he or she often feels fatigued, tired, lonely, unappreciated, and empty, and the family does not acknowledge the doer for what he or she accomplishes. The doer may become workaholic, deriving his or her personal satisfaction and self-respect from employment, and doers may attempt to meet their needs for love and belongingness, esteem, and actualization outside the family, which is perceived as a place of tension and misery. The family priest is cast in the role of embodying the family spirituality. This family member is denied sexuality and is expected to abide by the strictest codes of morality and virtue. The family expectation for this member is that he or she will take vows and become a monk or nun or priest, rabbi, minister, or sannyasins, renouncing the world and living for God and service to humanity. If this family member refuses to assume this role, he or she may be treated as if they are worthless, a family pariah, or a scapegoat. So these are different roles that people sometimes are forced into taking on, right? In a healthy family, it says members are not cast into rigid roles. Instead of pressing each member to embody a role to fulfill only one family function, each member is given the opportunity to experience each of the family roles. As a result, they incorporate positive adult and parental models of functioning. They are able to maintain themselves in their own families, and they are able to give and receive nurturing. They're able to establish a network of intimate friendship relationships in which they can experience love and belongingness. They have the capacity to function autonomously and to take initiative. They have self-respect and can respect the values and boundaries of others. They can accept their own mistakes and learn from them. They have the capacity to laugh and have fun. They have a relationship with their higher power, a source of inner meaning, strength, and hope. And so this is just what all, this is like normal, what should be happening, right? And this is what I'm working on, is trying to get all this stuff, right? Having self-respect, values and boundaries, accepting my own mistakes, learning from them, right? Finding, I do have the capacity to laugh and have fun. I've always kind of been like that. I can be very serious too, and a little bit, I can be the opposite too. I can be very broody, moody, and depressed if I want to, but I tend to try to be positive all the time. So, even if I'm having a bad day, I can still laugh. It's I know some people can't do that, but I'm actually able to do that, which is really a gift. It's a blessing. My brother, when he killed himself, I went to a friend's house when we got the news, and I went over to a friend's house and I told her, I said, my brother just killed himself, and we sat back and we hung out, me and my friend, and we were close friends and stuff. We were kicking back and we were laughing and joking around. I was able to laugh, because my whole life was a crisis. So I had to deal with things all the time that most normal people should never ever have to deal with, including being sexually abused, including being beaten and nearly killed by my mother, many times, and blood. My mother used to spill my blood. I mean, that's pretty serious, and each time it was just kind of like, one of these days you're going to kill me, and I used to pray for it. But I was, I was damaged. I was wounded and I was hurt, but I was still able to laugh and have a good time. And that's a gift, I think, because sometimes people can't do that. I was always able to still, find a joke funny or just enjoy being with friends. You know what I mean? I think it's just a gift. For sure, because I know some people can't do it. A question of boundaries. This is the next section here. We're going to run out of time, but I'll just read the very first part of this. In dysfunctional families, parents violate the boundaries of their children. And parents from these families do not respect their children's personal freedom and privacy. They discount their children's feelings, do not honor their attempts at independent thinking and decision-making, and do not allow them to experience their impulses toward creativity, spirituality, and self-actualization. These deficits in children's development are revisited by problems in their adult relationships and careers and with raising their own families. So this whole issue of boundaries is huge, and it's a big problem for people who have grown up in these types of homes. They said when parents disrespect a child's boundaries, the child's sense of self, his or her autonomy, self-respect, feelings of effectiveness, and of making a difference are compromised. In place of a healthy sense of self, children may come to feel that they are damaged goods, unworthy, inferior, inherently bad, incompetent, stupid, or ugly. This negative conditioning limits what they believe they are capable of doing, being, and having throughout their lives. And one of the central priorities of the recovery process must be to reconstruct this damaged self-esteem. So this is exactly what I've been working on for the last 4 years. And, feeling that I'm even just worthy to stick around. I mean, I was planning my suicides, up until the age of 41. And so, people don't realize how incredibly hard and how incredibly damaging this kind of stuff really is. And so they're going to talk about, they say boundaries are broached in different ways. In a physical or sexual abusing family, the child's physical boundaries are violated. In families where there is insanity or serious illness of a parent, the child's emotional boundaries are infringed upon, and the child may be forced into the role of surrogate spouse for the other parent or required to act as the ill parent's caretaker. In the substance abusing family, the volatile and immature behavior of an intoxicated parent creates confusion about appropriate boundaries in interpersonal roles. As there are no models of rational or predictable behavior, there's a breakdown of honest communication, a lack of emotional stability and nurturing by the parents, and a lack of safety that would permit trust, self-disclosure, and intimacy to develop. And in the fundamentalist, dogmatic, or authoritarian family, parents trespass on the children's right to think for themselves, mental boundaries. They also violate children's rights to make their own decisions, volitional boundaries, to interpret and act upon their own conscience, moral boundaries, and to experience and express their innate spirituality, creativity, and quest for meaning and value, spiritual boundaries. So there's a whole lot more to this article, and I hope you will go check this out, www.mudrashram.com. And we'll continue on with this Monday and see how far we can get, and maybe through next week, and then we'll finish it up. But it is really good stuff, and I hope people are getting something out of this. I know that I am. Thanks for being here, everybody. Monday night, Dina Dixon and myself will be on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. I keep announcing this, but I really want people to know. Monday night, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on Blog Talk Radio. We're going to be on at 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then Wednesday night, we have on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, Keith Smith, and he's the author of Men in My Town. He was on Oprah. He was one of the 200 men who went on Oprah's show to talk because he was a victim of a child sexual predator and sexually assaulted. He was abducted, kidnapped, taken into the woods, beaten, raped, and he lived to tell his story, and I'm so glad that he did. Keith Smith, you do not want to miss this interview. This is March 2nd. This is amazing. He's a public speaker. He's famous, and he's taking the time to come on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on Blog Talk Radio. So I hope everybody will get that information, and I'll keep mentioning it throughout the weekend and even next week, right? So if you need any information, please let me know. And have a great night, everybody. If you're a survivor out there and you're hurting and suffering, and make sure you get some help, right? Reach out and get some help. If you're a parent out there and you're struggling and you don't want to hurt your children, but you don't know how to help yourself, you don't know how to stop, get some help, right? There's help out there for parents who are struggling. You don't have to hurt your children, right? Make sure that you do, because your children, they're counting on you, right? So have a great night, and we'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.